Hi, Father. I'm here with my dear friend and special guest, Father Sam Waters, and we're going to start with a prayer.
My Padre, Filii, Spiritus Sancti. Remember, most gracious Virgin Mary, there was unknown anyone that fled to your protection, implored your assistance, sought your intercession, was left unaided, inspired with this confidence, confided you, a virgin, thy mother. To you we come before we kneel, sinful and sorrowful, mother of the word incarnate, despise now our petition, but in thy mercy hear and answer them. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father. Okay, well, I have a special guest, Father Sam Waters. He's an independent Catholic priest, which many people probably in our audience don't. We're going to get into what that distinction is. And do you want to tell me a little bit? My first question was, at what age and circumstance did it occur to you to become a Catholic priest? And did you have a strong Catholic upbringing? And speak loud.
I wanted to be a priest since the 4th grade.
Oh, really?
I started serving Mass then, and I grew up in an Italian parish. Neither of my parents were Catholic at the time.
Oh, okay.
In 10th grade, I asked my mother, why did we become Catholic? And she told me the story that when she looked at the public school system and the Catholic school system, she believed that we could get a better education in the Catholic school system.
Mm-hmm.
And the grace part of it
What year was this, Father, if you mind me interrupting?
Well, I grew up in the 60s. I was born in 1957, so somewhere in 1964, 65.
Just before the changes. Yes?
Yeah.
Cool.
Um,
Continue, I'm sorry.
we, the grace of was that she saw that she didn't want us to use just the school without what else it had to offer, which meant the faith.
Right.
And so I was baptized at 4 years old, went to school, kindergarten that year.
Do you remember the name of the
year.
priest that baptized you?
Father Stephen India, yeah.
God
Which
rest
I
his soul.
later, well, he just died in 2017. I found him in 2012. I thought he was already dead. And I wanted to make a holy card
Right?
with the 3 priests and whoever nuns who died as nuns that we had.
Right?
And when I was researching information, it was the receptionist who I was talking to when I asked her about the death date of
He just assumed. Wow.
Father India. She said, "Well, he's not dead. I saw him
awkward.
this morning at
A little bit awkward.
So I asked if she could patch me into him, and she did. She patched me into him.
Got to
talked
speak to
him. I got
him.
to talk to him. And over the last 5 years of his life, I would go visit him 2 or 3 times a year, and we talked on the phone.
Did he get last rites?
I'm sure he was in he was a Vincentian in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
They have a seminary, which really, I don't know at what point it was, where they went to school there, but
Right.
it was a retirement place really, and it had an infirmary, so he was all set.
Okay. Well, that's really great.
And yeah,
It's auspicious, you know?
yeah, it was interesting. I went once he died, and I went the day to the funeral, and I was going to go to the burial. The burial was in Princeton, New Jersey. They had a minor cemetery there. They sold the school, but they kept the cemetery, so he was buried there. But I was there. I got there early because I wanted to have time to pray. So I was in their private chapel, the Vincentian's private chapel there. And at some point during my prayer, a priest came in. He said, "Well, you must be Father Waters."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Yes, Father Sam Waters." And so he asked me at one point. He says, "Well, were you Father India's spiritual director or something?" And I said, "No. I was his altar boy."
Wow.
And he was amazed because he told me, after I told him the answer, he told me that when Father was dying, he was calling my name.
Oh, God bless you.
So, yeah, I was touched because Father India was the world to me. He baptized me. He gave me my first Holy Communion. He came to my ordination in the Nova Soda world, and he also came to my reception. And like I said, I thought he was dead all those years when I was.
Well, this speaks to how much influence a good priest can have in a certain person's life. If you meet
Um,
a good priest
well, it was.
in your life
I
and
loved
his
him.
life.
Yeah, I loved him, and I served. I was an altar boy until 12th grade. When our school closed after 8th grade for me, most of the altar boys had to go to wherever they were going to school and all that.
Was that the Novus Ordo Mass at the time? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I started on the old altar. By the time I started serving, they had already moved
Well,
to
what
65.
appealed to you to be a priest? I mean, what part of it was like, that's really cool, I'd like to do that? Or I know cool's like a derogatory, that's not the right word, but you know what I'm saying.
Well,
What would appeal to him?
he wasn't the inspiration. The inspiration to be a priest was his assistant, Father Colbert, who had been a missionary in China for many years, and he was thrown out when the communists took over.
Okay.
He was thrown out, and he was in charge of the altar boys.
Okay.
Rather tall guy, had to be like 6'4", 6'5".
Strict? Was he strict on this?
He was as mild as a kitten,
Okay.
but he was fair. He was, and he loved loved altar boys who were dedicated, who he could depend on in the process. And through my years in the progression from 4th to 8th grade, I eventually became the master of the ceremonies. I would give out the assignments when Father was away. Couldn't.
So you're kind of the boss of the other altar servers.
Well, not boss. The
Not
master
boss.
of ceremony was the guy who basically, particularly at funerals, he
Okay.
basically,
Made sure everything went to.
I told the people when to sit, when to stand. I made sure the other altar boys, the acolyte and the thurifer, were carrying out their duties and things like that, and fill in when something was needed to be filled in too. But from the first time I served Mass, and these men took us under our tutelage to teach us to serve the Mass, and I appreciate them deeply. And
And I
as
guess your
a
mother,
priest now,
your
as a
mother
priest,
supported you in all that, obviously.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
I can get into that at some point, but
Yeah.
When I was assembling the holy card for the priests and the nuns, I reflected on the fact that these were the people who taught us the faith, not only instructing us in the materials, but they lived their life, and as good holy priests and religious nuns.
Right.
And I always bragged when I would go visit Father India. We'd always sit at the table for lunch.
Right.
The visits were never long; they were maybe an hour long. But and part of it was have lunch with the other priests and brothers in the place. And I never missed an opportunity to tell the head guy, the guy who was running the whole thing there, that we had men. We had men when we were growing up.
Right.
These guys were first class men, and in a time and an age where there's such scandal in terms of the priest, I thank God every day for Father India, Father Colbert, Father Agnew. They were truly genuine men who loved and cared about us, and they weren't looking to exploit us, but they wanted to instill the faith in us.
And in a masculine way too. Yeah.
Well, most definitely.
Yeah. And that's what's under attack nowadays.
Oh yeah.
Even in the church, especially in the church. Maybe.
Well, that's why I would always brag to the guy, the head priest there.
Right.
These guys
were
real
mentions.
men. They're real men.
Okay. So I think you mentioned this. Who attended your original ordination, and who was the bishop?
Well, Cardinal Kroll, the Archbishop of Philadelphia, was the ordaining
Is that where it happened in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Okay.
In 1982, he was still there,
and then this father in India.
Well, Father India was there. I was ordained from a Jesuit parish at the time. My family moved to North Philadelphia, and the parish we were in was Jesu in North Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So there were three priest. I remember Father McCreesh, who was the pastor. Father Conway was one of the assistants. I forget the third guy's name, but there were three of them that were there. You had to have a priest be your homilist,
Okay.
because to make yourself the homilist would be to presume you had faculties. So they
Right.
wanted a priest who would already. That was a directive from the diocese. So Father Jim Shields, who I understand he's a Monsignor now in Philadelphia. I think he's still alive, but he was my homilist.
So he would write the homily, what, just would read
He
them?
would deliver the homily.
Oh, he would deliver
Mass.
when it was that time.
That-
Yeah. All right, well, staying in the beginning here, so then you moved to Novus Ordo ministry as a priest in Novus Ordo.
Yeah, I was in Novus Ordo for 18 years. I served as a U.S. Air Force reservist chaplain 11 of those years.
Were you stationed somewhere for that?
Yeah, it was a part-time ministry, so my home station was, or Air Force Base was Dover.
Dover, yeah, okay. I know Dover.
I would go there once a month. My commitment was 1 day a month and 2 weeks out of the year, and that was where I would go. I spent time, what we call TDY, temporary duty, 3 to 6 months, going away to other places.
What does that look like for a Catholic minister in the forces, in the armed forces? What does that? Do soldiers come up to you? They get confession. They go to mass. I mean, how's that?
Well, duty day, someone could want to see a chaplain, whether they're Catholic or not.
Right.
If they're willing to see the Catholic priest,
Right.
fine. We had responsibilities. It was divvied up amongst all the reservists and the active duty chaplains
Okay.
of spots along the base to visit.
Okay.
We had to go visit, the commander, the people working in the section, so that they knew that if they had a problem or wanted to talk to a chaplain, they had a name,
Right.
a person they could tag to. As reservists, we were attached along with active duty people in the same section. So, on any given day that you're there, you may get to know some people, and they may want to connect with you personally.
Right.
Other times, it's just a matter of you don't represent just yourself or your religious denomination when you're visiting. You represent the chaplaincy, so it's a way of the chapel basically make a connection to the various parts of the base.
Did you find that did you enjoy that satisfactory, or was that just?
Oh, I enjoyed every day I
Yeah.
served in the military. There was never a day that I didn't feel appreciated, wanted, and in some respects, that element, the feedback, was a positive and a supportive thing that I didn't always feel in my civilian assignment. So.
Okay, so that getting back to my next question. So your experience as a Novus Ordo priest, I think we spoke before that you felt it didn't quite fill that hole like maybe the military service part did that you just expressed, but the Novus Ordo itself were you at a parish? You were assigned a parish?
I was a parish priest for the most part. My first 6-7 years I was at temporary duty, meaning additional assignment was I was a day chaplain at a girls' high school. So once a week I would go there and help the full-time chaplain do his duties and things like that. I got heavily involved in scouting as leadership, probably too much.
Yeah. In what sense? Why would it be too much?
Because then you start
Distracted?
sacrificing, right?
Okay.
It's a distraction to your primary responsibilities. Those things like scouting, those things like for me in the military,
Right.
they became substitutes or sub things to have me go on.
Right.
When I wasn't taking care of my priesthood.
Well, it just seems to me that like the Novus Ordo and that kind of church, the way it is now, that it doesn't have the same satisfaction for a priest as because a priest, your first thought is service, right? So in the military and in these scouting things, that's about service. It's like a straight up, as close as you can get. Where you sit, is it wrong for me to categorize it that you weren't getting that feeling of service out of the Novus Ordo at the time, or am I reading into it?
I'm thinking my response to that is that all these distractions became distractions away from my prayer life, from taking care of my soul,
Right.
of being concerned primarily with my priestly ministry,
Right.
and those are the three pillars or three sections of the main parts of your life.
To be a priest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, then you're ultimately your vocation is becoming weakened by the moment.
Right. Vocation is the word vocation literally means calling. So it's your
Right.
calling.
Right.
It wasn't or you were getting distracted from what you felt was your calling.
Well,
by those
I
other
was distracting myself.
things. Oh, okay.
You know, you
But
do
why-
the things
why-
you like,
right.
and you don't do the things you don't want to be
Right.
bothered with. Right?
Well, why didn't you like that? That's what I'm trying to get at. I have a feeling that maybe that wasn't satisfying you,
Well,
like the other things were.
Well, what I found in the Novus Ordo world
Mhm.
is that the average layperson in the Novus Ordo world, they love priests with personalities.
Right. It's
Okay.
about right. Yep.
If
I
you
know
have
exactly
a
what you mean.
personality, then everybody's
Father
grabbing
Jim Bob.
at you, right?
Yeah, Father Jim Bob. Yeah, we love
Yeah,
Father Jim.
Yeah, right. And it's because he has a personality. Well,
Right.
I found out very early. I knew I had a personality, and people were attracted to it.
Right.
And the other aspect of priestly formation, at least one of the things I picked up in practice, was that there's no real difference between the priest and the layperson.
In the Novus Ordo, is that what you mean? Okay.
Yeah.
Where's the distinction? Where is it? Right.
Right. So, if you hang around a lot with lay people,
Mm-hmm.
that's not really helping your priesthood.
Mm-hmm.
I found. I mean,
Right.
for me at least, I can't speak for every priest, but for me, it didn't help. It actually hurt
Right.
because,
Well, it's kind of like fraternizing in the military, isn't it? There's a certain amount of you got to watch because.
well, if you become attached to people for the wrong reasons or
Right.
for the wrong ways, it doesn't help you
Right.
as a priest.
Mhm.
And
And it doesn't help them, maybe. In a
well,
sense.
it
Well, it makes
depends.
them feel good,
It
but
depends
they
what they want,
Right,
what they're
right.
looking for.
Right.
I found since coming to tradition that if people aren't looking to save their soul, or they're not looking for the tough life
Right.
as a Catholic, then you're not being a Catholic. But in the Novus Ordo world, the mentality is that I can be whatever I want to be and be a faithful Catholic at the same time.
Right.
And it's that whole
It's like
attitude.
compartmentalizing.
Well, the whole attitude is that I can have it all.
Yes.
There's no choosing involved. There's no drawing the lines.
Mhm.
And I've learned by being in tradition that drawing the hard lines can be the difference between you having a life in Christ versus a life that's just doing what you
Christ
want.
is just a button on your shirt.
Yeah, you're just doing what you want,
Yeah.
and
Well, that's perfect segue. That was my next question. So, when and how did the idea of true Catholic tradition come into your view? I mean, how did you get your ship steered into that port?
well, the first thing that had to happen was I just left. In
You left your
2000.
Novus Ordo ministry,
I left the Novus Ordo priesthood
Mhm.
in 2000.
formally, or just stopped going? I don't know how that works.
Oh no! I left active ministry.
Okay.
I told the diocese, "See you later," and I went into the civilian world or the layperson's world.
Mhm.
I spent 5.5 years working in child welfare, child advocacy work. I left that and I went into I was throwing bags on and off aircraft at the
Well, man,
Philadelphia
labor never hurt
International.
nobody, right?
Yeah, Delta Airlines,
Okay.
that company.
That's what happened to my suitcase.
And,
You owe me.
and then I finally ended up working for TSA.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
You're a tyrant. Get away from me.
well, during those 8 years, I describe it now as having gone into the desert where Christ
Right.
basically
Okay.
stripped me of everything I didn't
Mhm.
need or wasn't good for me. He just stripped it.
Right. And that's
And
sometimes we need to go through that. I agree.
You know, I began to read about tradition. I began
What were your sources? What was your source material when you started reading?
online stuff, and
Mhm.
and then being drawn to the mass, and eventually a priest friend of mine in New Jersey, who had been a classmate of ours, he studied for 4 years in the college with us at St. Charles Seminary,
Mhm.
and then he chose to go on to Mount St. Mary's for his theology,
Okay.
but he always stayed in touch with us.
Right.
And he became a source of some of the stuff I was reading.
Hmm. And he was encouraging you along this path, I guess. Obviously.
Oh, well, in his own way.
Yeah, yeah.
I found encouragement from him. I'm not sure he was
yeah,
directing
yeah, okay.
it.
That's fair.
Well, he taught me how to offer the Latin Mass,
Okay. Wow.
and his parish had a side chapel that
But he was Novus Ordo, but he was in tradition.
well
traditional side.
No, what it was that he was part of the Indol. The
Oh, right,
parish,
right, yep.
the diocese had gotten a parish
Right.
that had been formerly, and you've been using the term independent. I use the term
Okay.
priest in tradition. I don't use the term independent because we didn't just drop out of the sky.
Right, right. You didn't set up shop on your own.
Right.
Right.
We all came from somewhere. We either came from dioceses
Right.
or we came from religious communities.
Right.
You know, we did not just appear. So
just
we're not
decide on-
independent.
Right.
We embrace the totality of the dogmas and doctrines of the church, and therefore we've always been a part of the church.
Right.
What I found in tradition, and what every Catholic who moves from the Novus Ordo into tradition, he finds the fullness
Right.
of the teaching. The Novus Ordo world, thanks to Vatican II, is
Just icing.
basically, I believe what Archbishop Vigano says. He believes it's a false church. They
sect, yeah.
create another church,
Mhm.
which is just another, as you say, sect, another Protestant
Right.
sect. And the reasons why they've done that, I don't know. I'm not interested in knowing, but
There it is.
I know now that coming to tradition that's what's happened.
Well, let's go.
At some point in my learning to offer the Latin Mass privately, he gave me a set of keys. He said, "Father, come whenever you want, whenever your schedule permits. You can say the Mass." My schedule at the time was
For
like
yourself
once a week.
or for people?
myself.
Oh,
No,
okay.
for myself.
Okay.
Private.
Right.
I would go there once a week. My schedule, I was working TSA.
Mm-hmm.
So my schedule was like, I could go there once a week. to
Well, I'm
say-
in the TSA. I would hope I would run into you instead of.
Oh, no, you
Were you nice to the people, or were you?
Well, you had to be professional.
Yeah.
And you had to do the job. So,
Well, I'm glad you're out of that, Father. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Just
so I believe, and it was the way it worked for me, that Christ uses the Mass to bring his priest back.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in the process of that I wanted to go back to priesthood.
Right.
But I wanted to go back to priesthood in a place where I could offer this Mass. I didn't want to
Right.
forget it, and I didn't
Was
want to
that
lose
was
it.
that the 68 Mass or 55?
No, it was 62 Mass.
62. I always get those numbers.
No.
See, I'm Eastern Rite, so some of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, you're not the typical priest is going to offer the 55. He's either going to be not connected. He's not going to be connected to the diocese at all with
Right.
the Indol, because the reason why Summum Summorum Pontificum
Right.
chose the 60 missiles because, one, that's the first missal that gave the Pope permission to change it.
Mm-hmm.
The 62 missal was actually the Pope's first delve into changing it,
Right.
and therefore, whatever comes after that, he can keep changing. That's
Right.
why Novus Ordo World
Sort of like broke the glass
moves
ceiling.
into it, right?
Right.
Well, the 62 missile was created so that to lead people into the Novus Ordo, which people don't appreciate or
Right.
understand it. That's the whole point. The dialogue mass developed. They got rid of the 60. They got rid of the last gospel.
Right.
They
And there was a lot more
rid
participation by
of-
the laity.
well,
too.
they got rid of all the commemorations, and ultimately they got rid of. They started the dialogue mass where
Right.
you're talking back and forth.
Right.
Because before that there was no talking.
And what always used to bother me on that, because I'm in tradition too, but they used to like use the Eastern Rite as an excuse to do that. They say, look at the beautiful divine liturgy. They go back and forth, and we do. We go Lord in mercy, and it's a constant dialogue or sung mass. But that goes back to Cyril and Methodius. I mean, for them to use that, they sort of like hijacked it, just like you said. I that's my opinion. I could be wrong, but it just seems that way to
Well,
me.
they
Kept using that as some kind of justification.
The Novus Ordo Mass was a completely refabricated worship,
Mhm.
and that's what they one of the things they want to include in it was the dialogue.
Right.
So they set up the 62 missal so it would
That would get that.
they would get
rolling.
used to that, so
Right.
that by the time when they got into the Novus Ordo, it'd be no big deal because it's the same thing they've been doing.
Well, if I can interject on this, since I've been coming, I had to come to see you guys during COVID because our cowardly bishops closed the churches. And thank God for your courage of your mission church up there in Pennsylvania.
I never believed it,
You-
and every day since it's proven that.
Oh,
it
I don't
wasn't.
believe it in the beginning. Yeah, I understand. But my point is that here it is just before Easter. And this is probably when you remember meeting me and Philip Teets. And I'll have to edit that out. I'll take his name out. But me and my friend came out, and that was literally the first time I'd been to a Latin Mass in like years. I think years ago I tried to go to one, but I didn't understand because in the Eastern Rite we're very much involved in what's going on. What happens in the Latin Mass is extremely meditative experience. Not just to use experience, but that's not even the right word. It's
a meditative event.
yeah, it's a participation in an event in a way where I'm not busy. And I've noticed that since I've been coming that I really get a lot more out of the Latin Mass as an Eastern Riter because I don't have so much to do. I have to contemplate.
The only involvement that is prevented is not present is verbal.
Right, you can still, I understand, you can
Yeah.
still respond and stuff internally.
No, not only respond, but what I'm talking about, the reflections that can go on
Right,
need to be fed by our reading, by
Right.
our appreciation, and our love for Christ
Mhm.
and his Mass.
Right.
Ultimately, he's taking us to Calvary.
hmm
He's showing us through the ministry of the priest. He takes us to Calvary and says, "Here I am." And by doing that, when we leave,
hmm
it's not just an event in the past.
Mhm.
He is showing us presently, I have died for you. I have sought to forgive your sins through the shedding of my blood. And now you can go out and witness to that reality as you have experienced it, not as some historical event,
Mhm.
but as some current event that you've just attended.
You're like time traveling in a kind of weird sense, right?
Well, that's through the sacramental
Mhm.
ministry of the priest, Christ, who's both the victim and the priest,
Mm-hmm.
offers himself to the Father,
Mhm.
and he wants all of us to give witness to it in worshiping his Father, and then to be replenished and renewed in that reality by us leaving and taking that experience and live every day of our life with that reality, not something in the past, but something
Right.
that just happened.
It's a real living thing. And
Right,
it
because he
exists.
wants us to, in every age to experience his love through his death and
Mhm.
resurrection.
Right.
So the depth of the person's experience is determined by his willingness
Right.
to invest himself in not only a meditative but in a reflective sense of what's going on. There's so many things. It's like a baseball game.
Right.
Some people say that baseball is so boring because
No. Once you get to understand
but
it.
once you understand the game,
Right.
you realize there's so much going on
Yeah.
that you can't stop your mind from going.
Being enjoying.
Yeah,
Right, you're right.
So
You
it's
become engaged because of. On the surface, it seems like there's just some guys hitting balls and they're taking too long. But then once you understand the nuances of the players, how they're hitting, how the field is, how
strategy.
the strategies, who's coming up next in the bullpen. I mean, all that starts coming into play, and that's a good analogy for the mass. And I guess what I was trying to say is that you've been to the Divine Liturgy, I'm sure, so it's very busy. There's a lot going on, and it just seems my life is already very busy. You know what I mean?
Well, to be honest with you, I haven't been to a Divine Liturgy since I was in a seminary.
Oh, okay.
I go now to an Eastern Rite priest, Ukrainian priest, for confession.
For confession. Okay, I thought maybe you'd sat in a liturgy once in a while.
Well, I found him during the ending of the first year of COVID.
Right, same thing.
Someone told me
Right.
that this priest, and he eventually told me, his bishop told him to be creative. So what he did was he opened the doors every day.
Right.
And he said mass, and if people
Right.
showed up, they were at mass.
It's not his fault.
Right.
God bless him.
So I called him once I found I identified myself. I said I'd like to go to confession, and he says, "Well, what's a good time for you?" And so we zeroed down on 3:00 on Saturday afternoon.
Just show up.
And I show up, put the car in the lot, and I walk around the property until he
Sees you.
shows himself, and
Right.
I go and go to confession.
Well, it just seems like that COVID did do a lot of damage, but maybe in certain ways it also made connections that might not have never been made. Because I never went to you guys if it wasn't for that.
I was going to confession on my way home from church on Sunday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
I stopped at the local parish and hear my confession, do my penance, and go home.
Mm-hmm.
But now I drive 25 miles one way because my soul is worth it,
Right.
and I take care of the soul.
Right.
I go every week.
Well, just to tell the people, for me to go to the Latin Mass, it takes me an hour and a half. I have a Ukrainian Mass within 9 minutes of my house. But I feel that's, like you said, at first, I remember when I was younger, that kind of thought would come to mind, oh, this is so long, it's so far away. Convenience was very important. And then as you get older and you get closer to realizing that.
Well, I discovered the way I found my way back to priesthood was thanks to the Society of Pius X.
Right.
And I spent 2.5 years with them in Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay.
Well, I learned from them that traveling 2-3 hours was not uncommon for a traditional Catholic who wanted to go to Mass.
Right. Whole families.
Right. They would pack it up and drive away. And I got to experience that through COVID.
Mm-hmm.
When people discovered that my church was
Up and running,
open,
yeah.
they traveled 2, 3, 4 hours away. And they came and they were like you. They were very appreciative that we hadn't closed our doors.
Right.
And my attitude
Not
was,
only that, you didn't make us wear a mask or any of that ridiculous.
well, it's all stupid stuff. But I always told the people, there's 3 things a Catholic knows when he's born. 1, he knows that the day of his death has been determined. He has no control over it. The second thing he knows is that the manner in which he's going to die, how he's going to die, has already been determined. And he has no control of it. The third thing he knows is that he must keep his soul prepared to leave this world. And that's the only thing he controls.
Mm-hmm.
And I went on to say that if God has determined that you're going to die through this pandemic thing, you're going to die, and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Yeah.
And if God's determined you're not going to die,
nothing you can do.
Nothing you can do to make
unless you commit suicide, which no.
I mean, from the COVID, there's nothing you can do. And so, what are you afraid of?
Right. No, I agree. 1000%.
What are you worrying about? There's no reason to worry, because God's going to see you through it all anyway, and that's the way it was with COVID.
Yeah, and I was utterly scandalized by the Easter for the Eastern Rite Church. Easter is like one of the biggest to dos. I mean, that's where they do like all the things that I always loved at the Eastern Rite Church, and they just like shut it off like I would turn that light switch off because of commands from on high, from a government, not the Pope,
Well,
not from the you know what I mean, from a government.
well, you mentioned earlier that the damage that was done.
Yeah.
The major damage that was done by closing churches. You're saying, Mass is nice to have, but you don't need it.
Yeah, you don't need it. No.
The sacraments are nice to have, but you don't need them. You can just sit home.
I think that's what shocked me the most about the priest that I complained to directly. I said, Father, you don't understand. This isn't just some nice thing I do on Sunday. I literally need this to get through my week. I can't get through my life without coming to liturgy, right? And he's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is right now. You just have to, whatever. It was very dismissive, and it broke my heart really, because I love my faith.
Well, if you tell people you don't need them,
yeah.
then
But guess what? They won't need you.
well, the problem is that the unfortunate thing of that is that they do need them.
yeah.
But even if the church is telling you a lie
Yeah.
and you go along with it, it has its negative effects on you.
Right.
And from what I understand, they still struggle with bringing people back to church.
No, they decimated a lot of church. Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
just
So the one Eastern Rite Church, they're still actually wearing masks, and I used to love serving the altar. I know how to serve the altar on the Eastern Rite, and so every time I went there, this time now, it's like he was trying to tell me that you have to wear the mask. You have to go at a certain point during the liturgy. I said, well, Father, we have an iconostase. How about I just stay up here? I don't need to go out there. When we would go out there, they said you had to wear a mask for whatever reason. And I said, no, Father, I can't. I won't do it. He goes, he asked me, he goes, well, why won't you do it? I said, well, it's a matter of conscience. I can't do it in good conscience. He goes, conscience? Why? I said, because I feel it's bearing false witness. I don't believe that it does anything. I think it's a command, a wicked command from a wicked government. I'm trying to say all this during liturgy, by the way. He's interrogating me up on it.
well, my thought is that
So,
and my statement to them is, well, what do you do when the virus goes through your eyes? Because
of course, and
it doesn't only go through your nose and your mouth,
and it can cause infection into the eyes. People.
Oh, sure.
But anyway, I don't want to digress into the science.
Sure.
So now that we've got a foundation on how you came to where you are, I had a question about what is your day-to-day mission like? So, like, how does your day start as a traditional Catholic priest?
Well, now it starts every day between 3:30 and 4 o'clock. That's
In the
my
morning.
shoot time. It's time. If I get up later than 4, I'm behind. I'm late.
Okay.
I live 6 miles away from church, so
That's a
I get
blessing.
myself ready and I get myself to church.
Okay.
Currently,
What
I'm-
does that entail, though? You get up and do your prayers. What are specific? You have a specific set of prayers that you have to do, right?
Well, every priest has a responsibility to pray the breviary
Okay.
every day. I personally pray the 1954 breviary, which
Okay.
coincides with the missal that
Right.
I
Sure.
pray, meaning the liturgical year is the same. The saints are on the same day,
Right.
and the celebrations, the octaves, and all that.
Well, I'm ignorant of this, and some people who are watching this might be. What, in as short as you can, what is a breviary? What is it actually?
Well, a breviary is the official prayer of the church.
The whole church, the Catholic Church.
The universal church,
Right.
right? And it's segmented into 8 periods of prayer a day. It starts with matins, leads on to lauds, prime, which in the Novus Ordo world they got rid of prime. Then you have terce, sex, none. Those are what they call minor hours.
Mm-hmm.
If you think of 9, 12, and 3 p.m.,
Mm-hmm.
those are the hours for that. Following noon, you have vespers, which is evening prayer, and then you have compline, night prayer. So
And are these set on a clock, or is it a matter of just as long as you get them done in a certain?
you have the 24 hours to get all of them done.
Okay.
the timing I gave you is a general
Right.
guide.
Right.
I find for myself that I'm trying to pray, and this is the way the church works. That the heavy part of praying is the beginning of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Matins, I have 9 psalms and 9 readings generally, except
And
for
they
Friday
change?
days. They change every day.
Okay.
But you have 3 psalms, then 3 readings, 3 psalms, 3 readings. That's a good hour right
Okay.
there.
Right.
You know, if not a little longer. Then you move into Lauds, which is morning prayer,
Mm-hmm.
and that's about 25 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And again, within the 54 Breviary prayer book,
Mm-hmm.
these things can be extended based upon whether it's a penitential day,
Mm-hmm.
going through the seasons of Advent and
Right.
Lent.
Right.
If they're ferial days, meaning there's no particular saint being celebrated or Catholic dogma being
Right. Or
celebrated
feast.
or feast.
Right.
So these things can be mitigated to being bigger, more time or less time.
How formal are these prayers, Father? Is it a matter of you getting down on your knees every time, or is it something you can say while you're, I don't know, doing the dishes? I'm just making something up.
No, you have to bring attention to it.
Right. Right.
And from my own experience from the
Right.
past,
Right.
I try to pray most of it in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament at church.
Right.
There are days when I stay at church,
Mhm.
whether I'm working on my sermon or
Mhm.
doing other administrative things that I need to do,
Right.
or straightening things up, or getting things ready for something else, that I'll spend a day at church. Other days, currently I have 18 communion calls. So in the course of the month,
In this area or all over the place?
oh, they're all over the place.
Right. Well, I had a question on that, so we'll get to that.
They, I travel 5 states, including Pennsylvania. I travel
Every week,
in the course of the month.
in the course of the month. Okay.
I'm traveling. I have people in Maryland. I have people in West Virginia. I have people in Delaware.
And by people, you mean lay people who want the traditional sacraments brought to them somehow,
or the Mass.
or
right?
the Mass. Yeah.
I do. I was going monthly to Pittsburgh, but now that's become. Now it's whenever they call me, per se.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Well, I can atone that you also have to do last rite sick calls that may not be scheduled, so you don't know. And you
Oh,
did
sure.
that. And you did that for me, to my
yeah.
great appreciation.
I don't know. Well, I know. Other traditional priests have recommended me because whether it's because of my geographics or because
You're a willing horse, as
I
they
am-
say. A willing horse.
Yeah,
gets the load.
I'm not bragging, but
No, I understand.
and I think it goes back to my Nova Soda world, and I'm finding people being amazed at this. But when a priest gets an emergency call for last rites, other than Mass, everything stops.
Yeah, you can't think of a more important duty.
Well, if I had a Mass that I have to do and I get a call, then I
Right.
tell them I can come as soon as I finish the Mass and I'm on my way.
Right.
Just give me give me
Right.
my stuff, give me my information so I can get the GPS and
Right.
get me working. It was funny. I got a call. I'd been recommended by another traditional priest.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman called me. It was Saturday morning. I just finished Mass. I was in the office. I was going to be reviewing some things for my sermon the next day. She called. I took the phone call. She started explaining the situation. It was her aunt
Mm-hmm.
that she was responsible for. And she was
Yeah.
in deep Maryland. So she explained the situation. So I said, well, what's the woman's name?
Mm-hmm.
So I copied the name down.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, where am I going?
Mhm.
What's the address?
Right.
The location. So she gave me the address. I wrote it down. And then she was overly concerned, and she said, "Well, when can you come, Father?" I said, "Well, I'm coming now." And it was like a shock. Like
Well,
And I
if
couldn't.
I may,
couldn't get
that was the same thing that happened with me. You remember how apologetic I was? I felt like I was putting you out. I felt like, and you're like, Joe, you asked me. You can't stop me. It's almost like I was already out of the picture now. I've already asked. I've requested it. Not even I could probably have stopped you at that point. To exaggerate a little bit.
No, I tell people,
Which it was a shock. It was refreshing compared to most priests that you run into today as a Catholic.
well, I don't understand that because
I don't either.
because my
I'll be
thing
honest
is that this is a soul in distress. It's
Right.
like, and only I can help them. There's only the priest can do anything for them.
Right.
So if I don't go, it means in some respects I don't believe that.
Right.
I don't believe what's going on. If I don't believe it, I'm a hollow shell. What's the...
Well, I can tell you from experience, a very close family member recently passed away, and I was the only one in the family. First off, even thought of, and it's not a boast. I was shocked myself to even think about, hey, we got to get a priest involved in this too at this point, and I did, because of saying what you thought. I believe this stuff, so I don't care. So, but then the priest I talked to, which is the man's priest, he was like, okay, yeah, I'll get out there. I'll see what I can do. Yeah, we talked. When I asked him about it, I don't know. I'm not saying he didn't do the right thing. I'm saying he was so dismissive about it, in juxtaposition to how you treated me with my father, that it was shocking to me. And I think this is all symptoms of what we're talking about. This Nova sort of sect that doesn't even believe. I mean, it just has no faith in what it's actually even pretending to be.
Well, I mean, I just think it comes down to where the priest is at in his own life. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to make judgments.
No,
but,
no, I understand.
My thing
I wasn't
is
trying
that,
to judge. I was just shocked by the experience.
no. It's you would think, and for myself,
Yeah.
there's only one reply. It's
Yeah.
like, well,
Where
where am I
and when?
going? Where am I going, and how
Yeah. Right.
so I can know and who the person is that I'm coming to.
Right.
That's all. That's all that matters. And I've developed this mentality in tradition. When I get a call like that for last rites,
Mm-hmm.
my first thought is the Blessed Mother must have made
Yeah, you said
a promise to this person somewhere in their life that I will be there with you in the final moment, and I will not leave you forlorn.
Right.
And as the priest, when I get the call, I see myself as the one who's been asked by the Blessed Mother to carry out her promise to this soul. And therefore, I don't think there's any other honor that a priest can have other than offering Mass
Right.
than to be the one who fulfills the promise that the Blessed Mother made to this soul whenever she did.
Right.
And so I consider it an honor
Yeah.
to fulfill the promise.
Yeah.
And that's what I go to the last rite with, and that's what I leave that last rites with.
Right.
It's the fact that I carried out her promise to this soul.
Yeah.
And I believe it, and I live it every day.
As a priest, Father, what would you say is the thing? I'm not talking about in an experiential way, an experience way. What's the thing that is the most satisfying in your priestly life that gets you up in the morning? Maybe it's
I want to be his priest. In the Nova Soto world, I came to a bad spot, and the bad spot was that I came to the conclusion that he didn't want me. I was not being equal to the task, nor was I doing what I want. So he must not want me. So when I left the Nova Soto priesthood, in my mind, I'm never coming back to this because he doesn't want me.
And that hurt.
It was a blow, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's why I think he had to take me into the desert.
Yeah.
And now, having come back to priesthood, in the priesthood that I've said I always wanted but never had, I've come to realize that he did want me. And I think the biggest difference now is that I will not say no to him. When he asks for something from me, I do my darndest to give it back to him. And I tell people all the time, my days of saying no to God are over. And that's what gets me up in the morning. I want to serve and love him. I want to be him whenever he needs me to be that. And I'm committed to the salvation of my own soul. Because I lived those many years it was not being attentive to it. The priest is not only saved by his ministry, but he also has to be consistently involved with his own salvation. He has to take care of his own soul. He's got to do his prayer and be faithful to it. He's got to seek the assistance of Christ, his mother, and the saints whenever he is being challenged beyond his abilities. And he must learn to trust. And all those things were part of my Nova Soto world.
Well, that erases my next question, was how do you deal, because your schedule is so grueling, that how do you deal with the weariness? But now you just answered that question. The weariness.
Well, I had a reflection maybe 3 or 4
because I do notice you can be very weary sometimes. Things so hard, yeah.
Well, I had a reflection 2-3 weeks ago. The Nova Soto world, and we'll say Pope Francis, seems to want to destroy or get rid of a lot of the contemplative life in the church. He thinks they're a waste of space. They should just leave their monasteries and convents and go do
sell all they have and give it to the poor. Because
become social justice warriors in the mosque. And historically, it's been the contemplative communities that have always been the backbone of the church's mission. They're there praying day in and day out to advance the mission of the conversion of the world on the part of the rest of the church.
100% focus on that.
Well, in my reflection and praying, I came to the conclusion. I do a lot of work.
Yeah. Yes, you do.
And
You're the hardest working priest I ever met.
If I do a lot of work ministering, that means I need to pray all the more. Yeah. I need to continue to root myself in the one whom I represent, because it's not me doing it. Or only me doing it. I have to be rooted in the source of who I do it for and why I do it. Because I know from my previous experience, if you just get out there and you're just hanging for yourself, you're not going to be doing what he wants. Because you begin to think that it's you. Hey, it's not you. It's not you at all. It's you to the degree that you cooperate with what he wants from you. And because I do so much, I have to be rooted in him. Because it's the only way.
You don't want to get distracted even in all those duties you have.
What happens, you get lost. If you don't know who your source is and you're not connected to it, you're burning yourself. And I know where that goes. There's some things in life that should only happen once. Sometimes they happen more than once. But I know where that leads. And I know that that's death. And I don't want to be there ever again. And so the only way I can do that is to stay connected with him in my prayer and my reflections, and ultimately realize that I'm working for him.
Right.
I'm not working for myself.
And your weakness were strong. It's St. Paul said.
No.
Right.